Tell me? Your daughter's back there. So, I was going to ask where we got to, but I don't think I got it. It's 17. Yeah, you got it right.
We're on the seventh angel.
Yep. So, if you remember, it's kind of a think about it for a minute, but chapter 16, there was the different bowls of wrath, right? And so you had the 7 bowls of wrath and the 7 different angels that brought those bowls of wrath. And of course, we talked about, as we ended the chapter, Revelation 16. Let me get there. Should have my Bible open already. The end of chapter, she kicked you out. Chapter 16. It says, "The great hail from heaven fell upon men, each hailstone about the weight of a talent. Men blasphemed God because of the plague and the hail, since the plague was exceedingly great." This tells us it's not the final judgment, because those that were feeling the judgment were still blaspheming God. And so this is pointing to that not isolated, but that destruction of the persecutor of the Christians, which was Rome. And so in the context, as we continue moving forward, is that it's a focus upon those persecuting God, or persecuting God's people, which would be Rome at that time. And so in the introduction, I've got a couple things that I thought was interesting to add. We have seen God's wrath come upon the wicked nation of Rome in the last chapter. Here's a quote from James Meadows. It kind of summarizes what we're going to see here. It says, "What happens," quote, "what happens next in the Revelation is something akin to what occurs on your TV screen at times. After a wide-angle shot of some scene, the camera zooms in to catch the details of some part of it. The pouring out of the 7 golden bowls of God's wrath was a wide-angle view of his judgment against the sins of Rome. At the beginning of Revelation 17, we zoom in to see the details of what the judgment does to the imperial city and to all who depend on her." And so what he is saying is chapter 17 is really just a more detailed look at parts of what we have seen from chapter 16. Remember that this judgment day is for Rome, and really it's for any nation. As we go through this chapter, you can really see some similarities of the way Rome was, which we've seen this before, but of the way Rome was and really how America is becoming, and some similarities there. And so, chapter 17, I've titled it "The Great Harlot and the Beast," because that's what's really talked about here, and we're going to see why they're named the way they are. But let's read, somebody want to read verse 1 through 6. Revelation 17, 1 through 6.
Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk." And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon, the great mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled greatly.
All right, so as we've talked about, of course, the book of Revelation is focused upon images and signs and images, so it's not literal. And so we have this picture of this great harlot is talked about here. And it's interesting, as I was studying this chapter, there is sections of this chapter that have been, many commentators have said it's probably the hardest in the book of Revelation to commentate on and to interpret. And I can see that because, it's hard to pick out every detail and say, okay, this is exactly what this means. And so as we get to the end of the chapter, it's pretty evident of what is being talked about here, because it talks about that overreaching theme, I guess, of the whole book is that those on God's side win and those that are on the opposite of God lose. And so what we're seeing here is a description of this great harlot. And so verse 1 and 2, this is one of the 7 angels. And so we don't know which angel it is. It could have been the 7th. It could be the 5th. We don't know. But one of the 7 angels who had the bowls came and talked to him. This is John, right? So John is seeing this vision. He says, I will come, and I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters. And so the harlot. Well, this harlot, I have it labeled as Rome, because that's what seems to fit the most here. And why do I say that? Well, this picture is seen in other places. Somebody read, we're going to read a couple examples. Nahum 3 and verse 4. So I'm going to read that. Nahum 3 and verse 4.
Because of the multitude of harlotries of the seductive harlot, the mistress of sorceries, who sells nations through her harlotries, and families through her sorceries.
Okay, so that's talking about Nineveh. So Nahum was talking about Nineveh there. And he's describing Nineveh as a nation or a city that is like a harlot. She is seducing. She is pulling others into her fornication. You know, of course, we see that word use of fornication in the Old Testament many times in reference to God's people doing what? Yeah, committing idolatry, right? Serving another god, serving the small g gods. And so that picture of that, and God would say that they fornicated, they had committed adultery against him. And so that picture is given of Nineveh as that harlot who seduces, who tries to pull others into her wickedness. Somebody read Isaiah 23 and verse 15 through 17.
Now it shall come to pass in that day that Tyre will be forgotten 70 years according to the days of one king. At the end of 70 years it will happen to Tyre as in the song of the harlot. Take a harp, go about the city, you forgotten harlot. Make sweet melodies, sing many songs that you may be remembered. And it shall be at the end of 70 years that the Lord will deal with Tyre. She will return to her hire and commit fornication with all the kingdoms of the world and the face of the earth.
All right, so Tyre, which was a nation, of course, along the ocean here, city, a part of Phoenicia, which is right here, was described as a harlot also in her dealings with others. And that picture is given there. One more. Somebody read Isaiah 1 and verse 21.
See how the faithful city has become a harlot. She once was full of justice. Righteousness resided within her, but now only murderers.
Who is that faithful city? Jerusalem. Ezekiel 16 and verse 15 also.
So you trusted in your own 16:15.
Yep.
But you trusted in your own beauty, played by the harlot, because of your fame, and poured out your harlotry on everyone passing by who would have it.
All right, so Jerusalem is described in Isaiah as a harlot. Ezekiel describes her actions as being that harlot of pulling and seducing and involved with all the wickedness around them. And so we see that imagery in the Old Testament described as cities being described as a harlot. And so, like many times we've done, we can go to the Old Testament and look at the imagery there and see what John is talking about in the New Testament. So this harlot in chapter 17 of Revelation is Rome. Because what was Rome doing as it conquered different areas? What would it have done to all the nations that it captured? It would seduce and entice them to be involved in the wickedness that it was involved in. You think about it, Rome at that time, they were seducing other nations to persecute Christians, right? Christians were being threatened and persecuted and killed all out throughout all of Rome that they had control of. They were involved in emperor worship. They were involved in the debauchery and the things that were going on in Rome. And so they were influencing other nations to do the same things. And so this is a picture of Rome as that harlot.
But would the harlot be the Roman Church and the beliefs of the Roman Church? Because later on it talks about the woman. Isn't the woman actually the city of Rome, or is that the rulers of Rome?
So the beast really represents, I think, more of the emperors, the rulers of Rome, and Rome, and so they ride upon the emperor in a sense. And it could be different. Like I said, it's hard to determine which is which and what's going on, but it could be that way.
So is the beast and woman the same thing?
No, I think that the beast is the emperors, and then the woman is Rome. But the analogy you're using of the Roman Catholic Church, I think many have associated that with it, because throughout history, of course, what did Rome do? It switched towards Catholicism, and a lot of the things that have come from that. There's a lot of similarities there. So it could be. Some commentators do to make that association. But when we're thinking about the persecution and the things that they were doing, especially when we get down to see that she was drunk with the blood of the saints, it would point to the ones that were killing the Christians at that time, which would be Rome, for sure. And so here, that picture of her as the harlot is Rome. Now the water. Somebody reads Revelation 7. Go down to verse 15. I'll just read it. Chapter 17, verse 15. Really, at the end of the chapter, he gives us a picture of what is what. But verse 15 says, "And he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are people, multitudes, nations, and tongues." And so the image given in verse 1 is that there's this great harlot who sits upon many waters. John, or the angel, tells us that these waters are the people, the multitudes, the nations that are around. And so this harlot is pictured as sitting upon these nations and these peoples, influencing her, influencing them and seducing them into their wickedness. And so it's just a picture of Rome then causing the other nations to be involved in their wickedness. Now, go ahead.
Rome large.
Yeah, the known world at that time, they pretty much own.
Large geographical area, which is what I thought in my brain when you read that. Who sits on many waters? They took up a lot of real estate.
They did.
So they would have had influence in most of the known world
Mm-hmm.
with their evil.
Yeah.
It's a physically large city,
Yeah.
built on 7 hills too, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's imagery seen later in this chapter too, of the 7 mountains or 7 hills, and I think that's a picture of Rome for sure. Because when we think about it, the book of Revelation was written to a people that were being persecuted at that time by Rome, and so here this image of Rome being this great harlot to influence other nations into their wickedness caused this issue here. Now, think about it. It's today. Has our nation influenced others into the same wickedness and same debauchery? Yes. Yes. That's why I say, we go through the Revelation. Of course, the immediate context is written to the people at that time. But throughout history, there's many nations that could be pictured here doing the same things. And I think America is in this boat as that great harlot who sits upon many waters, who is influencing many nations to be involved in some of the wickedness that it's involved in. Now, thankfully, our nation's not to the point of persecuting Christians and being drunk with the blood of the saints, as the picture here, but it can be in the future, unfortunately.
In one sense it is, though. It's not necessarily naturally or physically, but you say you love Christ in certain sects or media platforms, and you get persecuted.
Yeah.
From a social media standpoint or from political standpoint, even like Tim Tebow in football, even from that standpoint, there's a certain layer of persecution that comes when you say, even
You are right on that, 100%. And so there is persecution going on. Now, so there are some nations where people are actually dying. China, we know some people that were preachers. We were preaching school with someone from China, and they were dealing with a lot of persecution there, people being killed there. Where's the one in Africa that's a lot of people are getting killed right now? What nation is that? I don't remember, but there is places in the world that is happening. But you're right, the persecution that we're seeing here in America, there is persecution. And so this is a picture of Rome and its influence in that time for those in the church at that time that were being affected. But this also can be seen, I think, as today with us. It says, those drunk on her wine, that was reference to verse 2. It says, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. That's a picture of their involvement. They were enticed to fornicate, in a sense, to be involved in their wickedness that Rome was involved with, and they become drunk with wine. That means they were enjoying it. They were at pleasure with what was going on.
Maybe I'm remembering Rome's practice to whatever nation they took over to make it look like Rome.
Yeah.
Culturally, the way they worship, all of it. They tried to get rid of whatever culture they took over and tried to make them assimilate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you think about Jerusalem. You had Herod's court.
Yeah.
Rome tried to Romanize even the temple.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting point.
They stamp on them real good at it. And
Yeah.
then they say, oh, well, listen, we want you to be like us, so we'll give you some benefits.
Yeah.
Now, we beat you down a bit.
Yep.
So to me, that verse 2, that's kind of how that fit into me. Like, they are going to take over, and then now you're going to do this because this is what we want you to do.
Yep.
He wants to look like us.
Yep. And so that's right. I think that's an interesting thought, is the fact that they come in and they try to change their everything to make them look the same. And that's what happened. They conquered these areas. All these nations became involved in it. But it says here they were drunk with wine. They joined in with Rome. They were enjoying the pleasures of what Rome provided for them, and also what they were involved with. And there was a lot of wickedness in Rome, a lot of sinful acts that were being done. The sinful things, it's religion, it's politicalness, it's an economy, all of that. They were drunk with that. So I'm going to read Isaiah 29 and verse 9.
Pause and wonder, blind yourselves and be blind. They are drunk, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with intoxicating drink.
All right, so there's Jerusalem. It's a description that Isaiah gives of Jerusalem. It says they're drunk, but not with wine. They're intoxicated, but not with strong drink. I can't remember exact wording. But what does he mean by that? The same thing. They are enjoying the pleasures and the wicked, sinful things that the nations around them were doing. And they were involved in that. And so that's the picture given here. These nations, as we've talked about before, Rome was going to be punished for their wickedness and their treatment of the saints, but also those that were what? Involved with them. Those that were drunk with their wine, is the sense it's given here. And so then that brings us to verse 3. It says, so he carried me away. This is John talking about this angel. Carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. We'll stop there for a second. And so this woman was arrayed in purple scarlet. Actually, I have the beast first. Let's continue on. Verse 5, it says, and on her forehead name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of the harlots and of the abominations of the earth. I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. And so this woman was upon a beast. Okay, that's verse 3. this scarlet beast. And so the beast, it says, was full of names of blasphemy. What is blasphemy? Okay. Yeah, against God, right? Blasphemy against God. And so when you think about this, the names of blasphemy, William Barclay had this quote I thought fits this perfectly. It says, every emperor was called Divus or Sebastus. I'm not good with those names, which means divine. Frequently, the very name God or Son of God was given to the emperors, and Nero on his coins called himself the Savior of the world. For any man to call himself divine with a blasphemy insults to God. Further, the later emperors took as their title the Latin word Dominus, or its Greek equivalent, Kyrios, both of which means Lord. And so, when you think of the beast having these names of blasphemy, it fits to think that this would represent the different emperors who took on these blasphemous names of calling themselves God, calling themselves lords. Remember, it's a couple chapters ago, I know it's been several months, but a couple chapters ago we talked about the beast and the emperor worship. The beast, I think it was the beast that came out of the water. And it was a picture of their religious worshiping of the emperor as God. Every city, if you go study, when you talk about Rome going into a city and changing it to Rome, they would put a temple there to the emperors in every single city. And so every city had a place where they could go worship the emperor. Why? Because they looked at themselves as God. And so when you see this description of this beast who has names of blasphemy, well, it'd be blasphemy against God by calling themselves God. And so this beast had 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, this is a picture we've seen before, right? Somebody read Revelation 13 and verse 1. Revelation 13 and verse 1.
Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his head a blasphemous name.
All right, so chapter 13, the first part of that beast that rose out of the sea we talked about was the emperors of Rome, that they looked at themselves as God. If you continue on through that chapter, there was 2 beasts in that chapter. Somebody read chapter 12 and verse 3. Okay, so the dragon has that same imagery. Did you read all that? So I cut you off, sorry. Diadems. Do you need glasses? Oh, wow. Getting old and married.
Good thing before it's too late.
I know. Usually the getting old happens later. Anyways, the dragon had the same image. So, this is images of those that are influenced by the devil, right? We talk about the dragon. The dragon described in the book of Revelation is the devil and his influence, and the beasts were his what's the word? His companions, it's on the tip of my tongue. The dragon is the devil. Let me get this right. The dragon is the devil. The beasts are his minions, in a sense, you could say. I guess you could say that. His minions that do his working, right? So we talked about the two beasts, his servants. Chapter 13 talked about 2 different beasts. One was the emperor in Rome working to influence people and do the biddings of the devil, and then also the second beast was a picture of the one that in religion and things like that, the emperor. And so that's the same picture given here. This beast is pointing to the emperor, a beast pointing to the one that has these blasphemous names. All right, so the harlot. some descriptions of the harlot. She is sitting upon a scarlet beast. What is scarlet? What color? Well, I mean, it's a red, right? All right, so she's sitting upon a scarlet beast, but she's also depicted as wearing what? Purple and scarlet, right? Linen. What was purple and scarlet? Royalty. Royalty, right? So, think about this. Let me read Matthew 27:28.
So is this the same beast, are we assuming?
The same beast as before?
Yeah.
I think it is a reference
So it
to.
came down from heaven, right?
Yep.
And now it's in the wilderness?
Yes.
Now it's just on earth?
Yeah, it's on earth as this beast, yes. Yep. I think it's the same beast as what we see in Revelation 13. It's just we have this harlot that's riding upon it. Matthew 27:28.
And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him.
Okay, so that was talking about Jesus, right? What were they doing? They were mocking him, so they put a scarlet robe upon him. Why did they put the scarlet robe on him? He said he was king of the Jews, right? So they were mocking him by saying, oh, you're royalty, we'll put this robe upon you. And so this picture that we have here is this harlot. So first the beast is scarlet, then this garment that she is wearing shows that she's royalty. So it just keeps pointing back to Rome. It's just a lot of descriptions pointing to the rulers, the emperors of Rome. But also, think about scarlet. We have a description in Revelation of white garments. What do the white garments represent? Huh? Purity, right? Represents those that were clean. We talk about the saints who were given those white robes. So since she's wearing a scarlet robe, what would that represent? Impure. It represents sin. It represents wickedness. And so I think we also have that description of her royalty, but also she is sinful. Of course, this is the description given here. She's a harlot. She's seducing, fornication, all of that. She is the complete opposite of the saints, right? The saints are the ones with the white robe. She is with this scarlet robe. And so one commentator said it's like her apparel is very attractive, right? It's very alluring. And so she is, and that fits her character. She's seducing. She's trying to bring these other nations into her wickedness. And so she has a cup also, right? She's wearing the purple and scarlet. She's adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. So her cup is that wickedness, right? Her seducing. She is handing, in a sense, to these people to seduce them, these other kings, these other nations. The image is kind of given there. Somebody read Jeremiah 51 and verse 7.
Babylon was a golden cup in the Lord's hand, making all the earth drunken. The nations drank of her wine, therefore the nations went mad.
All right, so Babylon is described as the one with the cup, right? Making what? Other nations drunk. Not literal. It means Babylon. You think about Babylon at that time, it was a very powerful nation. It had pretty much all the known world at that time under its control. And so they, at the beginning, were God's advocates, right? God was using them to punish the other nations. But then Babylon got to the point where they were so wicked that God said, I'm going to destroy you. And he sent Medo-Persia to destroy Babylon. And so that picture in Jeremiah is, here he's telling Babylon, you have this cup of this wickedness and you have seduced other nations to follow in that path. That's a picture we have here. And so she has this cup. Verse 5, it says, and on her forehead a name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of the harlots of the abominations of the earth. And so she has this image of her having this sign upon her head. James Meadows says this quote, there seemed to have been a Roman custom whereby the prostitutes in the public brothels wore a frontlet on their foreheads giving their names. These were their identification marks as prostitutes. Rome is pictured as the great corrupting prostitute among the nations. And so his thought, which I think is very fitting, is that this image is of her with this frontlet. Now, we've seen the frontlets before, haven't we, with the Pharisees? They put frontlets between their eyes, trying to make themselves look like they were great and religious. Well, here they have this frontlet to this harlot. She's telling the world that I am this great prostitute of the nations. I'm the seducing one. And so it's interesting, though, that the word mystery is used there. Because what is a mystery? Something that we don't know yet, right? Or at some point will be known. What is the gospel described as, or the church in the book of Ephesians? That mystery, the good news, but it was a mystery for a time that was now made known. And so maybe this description is, she for the longest time was a mystery, but now it's well known through all the nations that she is that great harlot as described here. And she's wearing that upon her head. The mystery of Rome's wickedness and its seducing of others is now revealed. But then verse 6, it says, "And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement." The last description we have is that she is drunk with the blood of the saints. What does that represent?
She wants to kill Christians.
She does. So she wants to kill Christians, and really is.
Killed a lot of Christians
Yeah.
drunk with the blood of the saints.
Yep. We talked about this being drunk back in verse 2, right? The other nations were drunk with the wine of her fornication. Now she is drunk, and that was a picture of them having pleasure in that, right? And being involved in that. Now is a picture of this harlot having pleasure in doing what? Killing Christians. Did that happen? Yeah. The emperors of Rome were proud and rejoiced in their wicked deeds. What do they do with Christians? Well, Nero, he took Christians and lit his garden with them. He would light them on fire. He'd put them in cages and light them on fire, soak them in oil, and light them on fire alive to burn as lights in his gardens. The Colosseums, they would put Christians in the Colosseums and run them over with carriages. They would let beasts tear them apart. And millions of people would sit in these Colosseums and cheer this on. They would look at it as entertainment. And so this picture of the emperors, or as Rome, and as who is this nation, had this, they were so happy and rejoicing and entertained by Christians being murdered.
American football's not quite that bloody.
No, it's not. But, there's some pretty bloody sports, for sure. It's entertainment. And so, John, he's seeing this, right? He's seeing this image. It's not real. I mean, it's pointing to something. It's a vision. But he's seeing this image. And then the last part, it says, "And when I saw her," John is speaking, "I marveled with great amazement." Now, when you hear the word marvel, what do we think? Yeah, in awe, right? Some would say, well, that was amazing. But that's not what's being described here. John's not saying, wow, that's amazing. What is he saying?
No, I think he's just saying, that it was so unusual and vast, he was just in shock.
Exactly. Shock is the better word. The word marvel here, one of the meanings, we're going to see this word marvel used twice. It's used in verse 7 also. And it means a different way in verse 7. I think it's verse 7. But this word means to be astonished or greatly surprised.
I think it was speechless, like he saw it and he just...
He was in shock and he was speechless, right?
The BSB uses amazed.
Amazed. That's right. Amazement or astonishment, that's a better word. Was John living in a time where this was already happening?
No.
He was. Think about John. This would have been roughly, if you use the later date, 90s, 80, 90s AD. And we talked about he's already exiled on the island Patmos because of his, yeah. And if you look at tradition, which the Bible doesn't tell us this, but the tradition says that John was covered in boiling tar and feathered. And then he, you know, of course, the repercussions of that. And then he was exiled on the island of Patmos. So John already knows the wickedness that Rome is doing. Why is he marveling here? Why was he shocked by what he saw?
The greatness of it.
Yeah.
Like he's seen a portion of it, but to know that it's so much more than what he's seen.
Yeah. He was so shocked by their callousness and by their rejoicing. You know, I don't think it's any different than when we turn on the news and see the things that's going on in America and go, wow. I mean, we've seen it before, but why? You know, people killing each other. You know, just yesterday there was a shooting at a school, I think it was a college. That happens quite a bit, unfortunately, because of people's, I don't know, I can't even explain why. But we see that, but yet every time we see it, we're still shocked, right? Why would people do that?
People also thinking it's funny, or like there's people in America that will laugh at, you know, school shootings or those terrible things, and it's just crazy that even if you don't support this or that or whatever, that you could still be that callous.
Yeah, people are assassinated and murdered, and people just laugh about it.
Yeah, that whole thing.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Abortion, you know, every day that happens, things like that, and people are just, and you see some of the reactions. Like I saw a video the other day of a girl, this lady was talking, she was, you know, on the street asking people questions, and she asked this girl, have you had an abortion? She said, yes, and I'm proud of it. It's just shocking when you hear that. And she says, I'm glad I did it, and I would do it again. You know, we know that stuff happens, but it still shocks us, right? I think that's the picture John has here. John knows what's going on, but yet he's just shocked by their callousness, by their rejoicing, by being the drunkenness with the blood of the saints means that they're rejoicing in it. They're entertained. They love it. And he's going, I can't believe that Rome's doing this. I can't believe that this is going on. And I don't think it's any different for us today. We turn on the news or we see a story about somebody doing XYZ thing, and we go, wow, how can people be so wicked? And it happens every day.
And if we're not careful, it can become a normality, and we'll find ourselves becoming numb to it,
Yep.
for the sake of a better word. And I've seen that happen in this
Yeah.
as it relates to Christianity.
Can easily become numb to it, callous to it. Hardness of the hearts. You know, the more that kind of stuff is put into TV shows and movies and become part of curriculum for schools, you know, transgenderism and abortion and all that stuff, people become more and more callous to it to the point where they don't think it's bad anymore.
Well, it trickles down to their kids.
It does.
You see it in our, you know, elementary school, that kids have the same views as their parents because they let them believe that it's okay and see that, you know, they don't support it or that they're callous against us or whatever.
Yep, it is. So, I mean, yeah, you know, John here is seeing in this image of Rome doing this. I don't think it's any different than what we see today. So, you know, Revelation was written specifically to a people at a time, but it's also for us to see nations can do this same thing, and nations have done this over and over again throughout history. And America is heading down the same road that Rome was doing. And so we've got to be careful. We've got to be aware of what's going on. You know, here John was getting this warning of what was going to happen to Rome, and they did. Rome ended. Rome's not here anymore. And if America heads down this same road, where's America going to be? Same boat. And so we've got to be careful, do our part as Christians to try to influence people to do the right thing. So I think that's it. That's a good place to stop. We're about out of time. Any questions or comments? All right. Thank you guys for your time this morning.